Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Doctor to Doctor in the chat room. We welcome you back to hang out with us for this hour. We have real conversations about real issues that matter. We discuss those relevant topics that impact our communities and our world. And today, we're going to take a dive into a topic that affects millions of people around the world: domestic violence. Domestic violence doesn't discriminate. It affects people of all ages, genders, and backgrounds, and it's a silent epidemic that often goes unnoticed and unspoken. But today, we're breaking that silence. In this episode, we're going to explore the signs. We are going to look at the impacts of domestic violence, and we're going to address those stigmas around domestic violence. And then we're going to also look at some resources that are available to those that are impacted by domestic violence. We'll hear from a very special guest, Dr. Robert Cannon, who has done so much work and so much research around this topic in an effort to end the cycle of abuse and bring hope to those in need. And I want to just say right here, if you or someone you know is in an unsafe situation, please remember that you are not alone and that there is help available to you. So stay with us as we unpack this critical issue and together raise awareness uh, in order to drive change towards this particular issue in our society. I have to say before I go any further, thank you guys so much for coming back every Saturday at 2 p.m. to hang out with me for this hour. As I always say, if you didn't come back, I wouldn't be able to do this. So thank you so much. I hope that you guys are staying safe as always. And I look forward to seeing you and hanging out with you at this time every Saturday at 2 p.m. right here on WOJG 94.7 FM. Now, I want to introduce our special guest today as we talk about this critical issue of domestic violence, Dr. Robert Boyd Cannon Jr. His career path and professional interests detail a small portion of his passion for criminal justice and education. He recently completed his doctoral studies in criminology to further his master's in criminal justice. Although criminology is his first passion, Dr. Cannon dedicated a portion of his life to education through a bachelor's in secondary education with an emphasis on social studies. Dr. Cannon devoted nearly 7 years as an educator and 10 years in the correctional justice system. After achieving his educational goals, he envisioned continuing to contribute a portion of his time and knowledge to the population of children and adults experiencing sudden changes in criminal justice and education systems. He enjoys improving the quality of life for others and hopes to leave behind his contribution as an educator and criminologist. And we here at Doctor to Doctor are so happy to have him. We've had him here before. Today is actually a special day for him, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But so happy to have him back in the chat room today. Welcome back, Dr. Cannon. I'm so glad to have you back in the chat room with me.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, and listen, before we go any further, I just want the audience to know that today is a real holiday. It's your birthday. So happy birthday, sir.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. I've been enjoying it. I've been
Yeah,
enjoying it.
well, awesome. So listen, this is definitely a topic that we cannot afford to ignore, right? The numbers are actually pretty staggering. I was looking at some statistics by the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence that said 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men will experience severe intimate partner violence in their lifetime. And they indicate that every minute, nearly 20 people in the U.S. are physically abused by an intimate partner, and that adds up to about 10 million people a year. That's to me pretty shocking and pretty staggering. Um, I know that we are celebrating this whole domestic violence awareness time of the year. But I want to just start with, before we jump into a deeper discussion about it, just tell us, let's lay the foundation. What does domestic violence look like?
Well, once again, before we get started, Dr. Shaw, it's very good to be introduced by you. You're
Thank
someone
you.
who is set the stage for most and many, and it's always a good interest to talk about domestic violence because it's a subject near and dear to my heart,
Yeah,
and I'm so glad that you created space once again.
absolutely.
In order to talk about domestic violence, we have to first know that we're looking at it through the feminine perspective lens,
Mm-hmm.
and the abuse there's so many indicators of abuse, such as physically hitting somebody, hurting someone, hitting them,
Mm-hmm.
such as taking their phone, such as kicking, such as punching, such as even telling them where to wear their clothing, where to go financial, keeping the phone cards, the cards, bank cards, any
Mm-hmm.
type of manipulation where a person is exerting power over another person and making them feel as though that they're basically worthless, or someone that feels that they don't have a place in life. That's what it is. It has nothing to do with sex.
Mm-hmm. Um, and this is something that we can talk about later. I mean, as you're laying this out, I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm thinking how much work has been done around um, the mental struggles, the mental illness around this, because, like, I'm wondering, like, where do you have to be mentally to allow it, right? Because we, on the outside, we typically say, why does she deal with that? Why does he allow that to happen, right? But there has to be something going on there that put people in a position where they feel like they have to.
Yes, yes. Some people they like to operate on a hyper level of sensitivity, chaos,
Mm-hmm.
and abusers want to make a person bleed over their pain and hurt. And what they do is they try to take a person to a place that they can't come back from. One of these syndromes is imposter syndrome. Now,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people like imposter. Who's the imposter? The imposter
Mm-hmm.
syndrome makes you feel as though that you, the individual that's being abused, are the imposter, and that you don't belong at work. You don't belong in places that people say, "Hey, you did great today. You did a wonderful job. You're at work. You're working. You're working hard." And when people when they receive the award, they're like, I don't deserve that accolade. I'm not worthy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worthy of this. And
Mm-hmm.
the person that's narcissistic that is implementing on this person
There's that
and, put,
word.
and putting it on that person, they're subjecting them to that and making them feel that way. And
Mm,
so once that person falls into that imposter syndrome, it's hard to come out of that because you're trying to help somebody that really don't even know that they need help themselves.
yeah. I know we're talking about domestic violence, but it's hard. And I mean, like, you took the words right out of my mouth. It's hard to talk about it without mentioning narcissism. Like, and I have found in my research that it's one of the toughest abuse for people to come back from, narcissistic abuse. Yeah, because I mean, and here's the thing, I think in the past we may have called this stuff like brainwashing, or I heard you use the word manipulation and all of that. And I think we found some new words and titles for it over time, right? But it's like, this ain't new. We've just been calling it something different. Yeah. Go ahead.
So domestic violence is an existential threat
Mm-hmm.
to a person's well-being. And when a person is implementing their will on another person, they so fast, it's almost like you lose yourself, and then they even try to bring your family in. The victim narcissist goes to the family and say, "You're making them do it, and this person's acting this way," and they even cry. They feel as
Mm-hmm.
though that they're totally the victim, and sometimes the family members. That's why I would tell people to get some form of actual licensed counseling. Sometimes they tell them, "Well, go back, y'all can make up, or you're missing that house, or you're gonna miss that money." And it's like they push you back into that. And also a person when they're experiencing it, they feel helpless because when they're trying to get the help, they're not getting the help they receive that they're supposed to, because some people, just because everybody's a counselor don't mean that they're supposed to be a counselor.
You better say that.
And so, you have people who are trying to get help, and they're subjected to people that when they're trying to get help through the agency, through the person that's prosecuting, the prosecutor or the
Hmm.
attorney, legal aid. Sometimes these people aren't giving them the proper guidance that they're supposed to have.
Yeah.
So, it can be a very demoralizing state that the person can be put in. And also, when they're trying to get out, is a false sense of security about leaving. So,
Yeah.
it gets interesting.
Yeah. So let's talk about separating from domestic violence. Let's talk about that.
Well, when a person separates themselves, they feel as though that from domestic violence, they feel as though that by leaving that situation that they're helping themselves. And that is a very, very dangerous point. I always say separation and Cinderella phase, these are dangerous points, because the person, the abuser, feel as though that they have no power anymore, and they feel as though they have to do something very harsh, or something totally just to get that person's attention,
Over
such
the
as
top. Yeah.
over the top. Very. So, when people go through a divorce, when a person divorces an abuser, a person tries to put in a peace order or stay-away order on that person to protect themselves
Hmm.
during the divorce. But I found out through my research that when a person divorces a abuser, they have to refile that again, because that stay-away order no longer is legal.
Now,
It expires.
do you know that to be true in any state, or is it in certain areas, or do you know?
The majority of states, when you are in a domestic violence, when you're in a divorce, you have to
Hmm.
refile that stay away order, because once the divorce is over, like in Texas,
It's
Louisiana,
null and void.
it's null and void. And so here you are with a false sense of hope, thinking that this person is away from you. You have protection, and honestly, that stay away order no longer has any power. And once again, it's null and void.
So I have my thoughts about, protective orders or whatever they're called, because I mean, even though it's says that a person is not supposed to come within so many feet and all of the things that it says, I mean, it cannot keep a person from hurting you, right? And I mean, and depending on how over the top they are, right? Even if they're going to be held accountable, if they unalive somebody, I've just seen, maybe I've watched too many movies or something. I don't know.
No, no, Dr. Shaw, you're correct. It's funny that you mentioned that, because Louisiana just passed a law. When a person is 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 convicted of domestic violence, it can be a misdemeanor or a felony.
Hmm.
Now, once they get out, if they're on parole, they let everyone know, but they have an ankle monitor on them. The
Hmm.
ankle monitor is supposed to notify you that they are notify authorities that that person's in the area. And what
Hmm.
these individuals doing, they're jamming the ankle monitor with aluminum foil, so people don't know that that they are in the area.
Yeah.
Also, what the state has done in Louisiana, they have put it to the point where the actual monitoring company has now been held liable after 6 months for any wrongdoing the person has done while they're being monitored by the system. So you're absolutely correct. You think that by that person having a stay away order, or that they're being monitored, that then really it's a lot of disconnects as it relates to law enforcement and surveillance of those monitors. So I would tell people that experience any separation, please be careful. Please be mindful that things do happen, and be aware of your surroundings.
Yeah, because it seems like we're expecting someone that is an abuser, someone that is a narcissist, someone that's the perpetrator, to have to use some common sense just because they have this order against them. And I would think that people with that mindset probably have a don't care mindset.
Yes, yes, they operate on the lines of chaos, the boundaries of chaos. And just because the
Mm,
person perpetrating, they're actually intelligent too. They just are abusers. And
yeah.
then when you try to call the police and inform this, you're complaining to the police, but a lot of police officers, as well as correction officers, have a high rate of domestic violence. So it's almost like you're preaching to the choir. Did you see him?
Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah.
saw him. Well, where he's at now? Well, they
What a
try to
great
make a
point.
lot of excuses for a person doing those, committing those acts. So it's different avenues that you have to go through to protect yourself, such as asking the district attorney to give you or give you a reference to a domestic violence agency. That reference will enable you to help yourself as well as solidify a form of security where you don't feel isolated for the most part.
Hmm. So what are some other things that I mean that someone should be aware of that's in an unsafe situation and they want to get out, right? I mean, I guess the guidance for people would largely depend on how severe, the case is. I mean, I guess if you've been with somebody and you're being abused, you know kind of what they're capable of, right? So you would know whether you need to be in a shelter somewhere, where no one knows where you are, or if you can just go to a family member or, or whatever. But I've heard that there has to be a plan, right? So what does that look like, making this plan to get out?
When you're making a plan, first thing you have to do is make a conscientious effort to know, accept the fact that you are a victim and this person is going to seriously harm you. Because that's the first step of recognizing that you are experiencing a problem so you don't go back.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get away, they have agencies like the Red Cross, they have, they have the Red Cross, they have Salvation Army. These are umbrella agencies that you can come over, and they're people that if you're on the run, hey, I might have to sit out here for a little while till the people come in. I
Mm-hmm.
might have to stand at this door till somebody opens the door. But they're
Mm-hmm.
also very helpful, and they open up an umbrella agency to help you out. Agencies to help you out, as well as getting rid of that phone. I didn't say get rid of the phone. That phone is tracking,
Yeah.
and it's GPS aligned, as well as a lot of times what we do now is we put our phone calls on our phone. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you're using a phone, this person's tracking everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
So sometimes, some people leave a Dear John letter, a Dear Jane letter. Sometimes it's just good ideas, just leave the phone. And
Just
so,
let it go.
that you can get other places where they can help you out, and they'll give you a phone. The agency will give you a phone where they can communicate, where you can communicate with them as well as the police. And also talking to family members that really are in your general benefit, saying, yes, you can stay with us. But like I said, when you do that, you have to go through the measures of getting a stay away order to truly protect yourself and
Mhm.
protect others that are helping you as well.
Right, right, right. Um, you know, I'd like to talk about when, how it complicates things when children are involved. We'll talk more when we come back from break. We're already at a break that quick. We'll be right back in a moment right here on 94.7 FM. I am still here with Dr. Robert Cannon. We're talking about domestic violence. We're looking at signs of it, talking about addressing some of the impacts of it. We want to talk later about some resources available for those that might be in situations of domestic violence. Let's talk just a little bit about, you got a person, it's just them, a man and a woman, and either one of them are being abused and they want to get out, and all they have to worry about is themselves. Like that's one thing. But what happens when there are children, particularly small school age children involved, and you need to get away and you need to be discreet? How do you do that?
Well, whatever it is, of course, the children are impacted by domestic violence. You have to take your children with you,
Yeah.
and also inform the people at the agency that you have minors with you. It makes your situation much more intense and impactful. and explaining to them about the situation with the children, explaining to them that how they're being impacted by the domestic violence. Because a lot of times people, when they're being abused, they're in their own zone, so they're thinking the children don't hear the arguing,
Mm-hmm.
the children don't hear the fussing, and the
Mm-hmm.
children are psychologically being affected by the domestic violence as well. So, like I said, once you get them to an agency, usually in the shelter, they have no problem with letting the children come. They do things in the shelter with the children, and they also have a counselor for them, consultation services, but bringing the children with them, and also being mindful when you do have to reach out with that person, if they're manipulating the situation with the children as far as spending time with them, well, I didn't see my children, you have to meet me with my children. Or
Mm-hmm.
then they play mind games and you're standing out there and they don't show up. That
Mm-hmm.
cell phone is your best friend, the new one. Take a
Mm-hmm.
picture, hey, I was here, uh, he didn't show up. I'm videotaping a time and date. So when you go to court, he said, "Well, you didn't let me see my children." Well, I have video saying I was here such and such times, and you didn't show up. Me and your child was here. Also, if that person is to the point where they are, well, you feel like it's a real seriously life-threatening situation,
Mm-hmm.
and they're still forcing you to meet with that person, tell them I would like to meet at the police station.
Okay.
Walmart don't have the correct surveillance. Well, they probably do, but now when it comes down to domestic violence, I
Yeah.
like to meet him at the police station. I like to put that in my divorce decree, and a lot of times people can do that as well. But
So
definitely getting
are
the children.
schools involved at any point where, maybe one parent, the perpetrator, I'm thinking, wants to come to the school or take the kids out of school? I mean, what legally can be done about that if both parents have rights, equal rights to a child?
Once you remove a child out of a school, and you place them in a new school, whoever placed that person in a new school has rights to that person's records and taking them
Got
out
it.
of school. The
Got it.
school, if you I'm John's dad. Well, John, you're not on the list and you're not registered with them because of course you have a new school, new setting, and new
Mm-hmm.
help. That
Mm-hmm.
person can't come to that school and pick that child up any longer because they have to be on a registry to pull them out, and they can't just take them out just because it's paternal. They can't remove them. That person has to be on the record of when you register a child for a school.
Mm-hmm. So something that you don't hear about as much, workplace domestic violence. Let's talk about that.
Well, there are different examples of workplace violence. One is, believe it or not, Tina Turner and Ike Turner. That was
Okay.
workplace. That was workplace domestic violence. That was her
Okay.
boss. He
Mm-hmm.
controlled the money, and it was several instances of abuse where it caused her to be harmed and feel as though that she didn't feel as though she was worth anything in a Puffy situation. Now, that Sean Combs thing, that was people don't realize it wasn't just the fact the woman was abused when she was leaving. He specifically kicked her and pulled her in certain places. He kicked her in the vagina. He kicked her in the butt. And he pulled her hair. All those areas where he's showing that I dominate you and you're not worth anything. He didn't just randomly just pick spots. He sat back and administered, sat back, apply, sat back, grab. And then drug her down the hallway. So these are all demoralizing aspects. And as it relates to the workplace, people do experience that with their boss. They should have a government program assigned as it relates to giving them a policy where they can go and complain, but a lot of times that's not implemented. And so that they have to set up something where they have to realize we do have employees like that. They are impacted through EOC operator, or for that matter, of federal law that protect these individuals that are experiencing it.
So, you know, so when you think about workplace domestic violence, is that a common thing? And if so, is the physical part of it common, or is it more the control of the money and the control, is it just a control thing?
That goes to a synergistic effect.
Mm-hmm.
Synergistic effect is when two things together outweigh one. So if a person's mentally abused, economic abuse, that far outweighs that actual physical abuse. So it becomes compounded. Domestic violence in the workplace is extremely prevalent in the workplace, and some of it even goes into the form of people getting homicide or murdered at the job.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
it is different levels to it, and there's different levels of getting help. But no matter what, people are still exploited through that because when they leave work to try and file to get stay away orders or to protect themselves through a policy, a lot of times by them only working within 1 year, if this comes up at the job, they get fired. And that's why I did the work with women, because a lot of times they have the children and their voices as victims aren't heard because they're being terminated because of domestic violence.
Hmm. What about fighting the red tape to get help?
The best way you can fight the red tape or getting help is being sincere. Sometimes there's nothing wrong with saying he's about to kill me. You
Hmm.
can't make excuses for him anymore. He's threatening to kill my child. He's coming to my house with guns. He's doing this. And so being steadfast and prayed up and focus on finishing your course or starting your paperwork. Because a lot of times people stop it. And so sometimes people were like, well, I'm not going to help her. She's not going to go. She's going to go back anyway, which is not the perfect or good attitude to have anyway with helping someone domestic violence. But some people undertake that. So sometimes well, did you know that how he's going to feel? Did
Hmm.
you know what's going to make this person, they start almost like looking out for the abuser instead of the
Hmm.
abusing. So you have to stay focused. You have to keep showing up. And some of those places that you're meeting at, it might move a little bit because when you go to places that help people with domestic violence, there are places in innocuous dwelling, something late, set back, you know, unaccessible to protect the people that are trying to get the help so people don't follow them or harm them when they're actually getting help. So just
Hmm.
going to places like that and staying, following your paperwork, diligently meeting people, diligently making appointments that are set for you, and asking if you can't afford it, ask for a person as relates to a lawyer, legal aid lawyer to help you out with your domestic violence or as well as divorce. So
Hmm.
these things, just knowing that you have to stay focus, you have to keep pushing and stay strong. And because
Hmm.
that person's going to come at all kind of angles. No one wants you. You making me do this.
Hmm.
You can't come back here. Somebody's going to take your place. They're going to play all kind of mind games because they're a little scared to come around because they know you filed something. They know
Yeah.
you're in a court now. So now they know that you'll call the police. So they
Hmm.
like I said, they like to operate on lines of chaos. So just staying fast and staying focused, following up with the the sorry about that. Following up with
Hmm.
the appointments that are set in place for you
Hmm.
and resources that people implement for you to get help.
So, how do cultural, religious, or societal factors influence the prevalence of just the reporting of domestic violence?
Some cultures, as it relates to religion, women don't feel as though they have the right. It depends on the religion. The men feel as though that they're supposed to display dominance. They can do what they want to. And
Mm-hmm.
culturally, these women are brought up to believe that way, and they want them to submit through their religion to actually deal with that. Some
Mm-hmm.
cultures don't call the police. Some
Mm-hmm.
cultures they handle things within their own religious faction.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times, as it relates to reporting things, you can't just always depend on the church, and then they might put your business out too. So a lot of times you have to go with getting an actual consultation away from a different entity to actually get your help. But people can use their religion to mask. Well, you need to go back to the Bible said this or the Quran said that, or you need to follow him and he'll
Mm-hmm.
forgive him. And at the same token, they're not taking these licks. They're not getting strangled. They're not getting to the point where they're immorally or injured to the point where they're disfigured. they're not receiving that. So a lot of times they can't tell you about what you need to do in your house from a religious perspective when they're not experiencing it.
Mm-hmm.
But like I
So,
said, it's a good place to talk to people if you have that type of close knit church, or if you have someone you can divulge your information to. But like I said, it's best if you go to a licensed counselor.
mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, I'd be willing to bet that there are still churches that are telling people to pray, pray things away that you really got to go get help, right?
You have to get help, and a lot of times is is that guardrail that they use to keep you in their situation at the church not coming out. So
Mm,
like they don't want this to become explosive. They don't
mm-hmm,
want to become a point where their business is aired out. So a lot of times they try to suffocate the situation or put it down. But any form of domestic violence, whether it's minute or
severe.
highly impactful, it needs to be reported. It needs to
Mm-hmm,
be reported to the proper authorities.
mm-hmm. Are there particular groups, I don't know, the immigrants, the LGBTQIA plus groups, men, that face unique challenges as it relates to domestic violence? I know men do because I know we probably don't even know the real statistics because they probably don't want to report it most of the time.
A lot of men, a lot of people that are transgender or of different natures as their sexuality, as
Mm-hmm,
well as heterosexual men, they experience domestic violence also. But a
mm-hmm,
lot of times it's not amplified because of the fact that they can, hey, I can go to the shelter, I can go with my mom, also my dad. They don't have a lot of times the children that impacts their finances as much. So they
mm-hmm,
don't push that into fact, but they do experience it, and I would ask them. It has nothing to do with your sexuality. If a person is imposing their power on you, they are hurting you, they're trying to administer themselves over you
mm-hmm,
by any means necessary on their fact on their part, you need to get up. They will help people that are transgender. They'll help people
mm-hmm,
that are homosexuals,
mm-hmm,
heterosexuals, whatever they identify with. It's actual help, but they have to admit and they have to come out forward and reach for that help.
mm-hmm. What would you say are some of the long-term effects or impacts of domestic violence? I mean, whether it's, psychologically, emotionally, what are some of those long-term impacts?
A lot of times people experience PTSD. They don't know they have it because their life has been online. They've had near-death experiences. Some
Mm-hmm,
people experience eating disorders, sleeping disorders, trust issues. It can be far ranging, and but the ones that are underdiagnosed is that PTSD, and
mm-hmm,
it's hard for you to diagnose because like, well, I didn't go to a war room or war situation. I
mm-hmm,
wasn't in the military, but yes, he did strangle you till you pass out. Yes, he pulled the gun on you. Yes,
mm-hmm,
he drug you out the car. Yes, and then he had nerve enough to say, "You're making me do this. It's
mm-hmm,
your fault." So a lot of times people don't realize when after they're getting away from that, why am I still angry? Well, certain things make them short fused, and they don't realize they did not get any help for that PTSD or them underlying experiences or syndromes that they could experience as it relates to impacts of domestic violence. But through consultation, a lot of that can come out.
mm-hmm. What would you say are some common signs that somebody is in a domestic violent situation? What kinds of things, do we look for?
A lot of times we look for marks, but it's the underlying factors that show up, like the
Mm-hmm,
withdrawn from things that they do, withdrawn from their family,
mm-hmm,
isolation from the community, isolation in the home, the wearing of heavy clothes in the summertime, the unexplanation, being able not to explain marks. Why you look one way going into the parking lot, and when you come back into the building, you look another way. Shouting, screaming, taking over. Well, He came and took my car. Well, he didn't come pick you up. Well, he told me he's gonna get my own ride. They have the staying late at work, and
Mm-hmm.
then don't wanting to go home, or because they don't feel comfortable at their own house. It's it can be far ranging. The taking of the phone. Well, you just had a phone. Well, he threw my phone. She threw my phone. That's a form of abuse. I'll be honest with you. Some people do this still to this point. I told you get off that video game and go get you a job. I told you watch the child. When they take the video game and throw it against the wall, that's a form of abuse control.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that can form of a control or a cement slab or a ceiling where a person feels like they cannot go through and have peace, and a
Mm-hmm.
person is empowering themselves over them, that is a form of domestic violence.
Mm-hmm. So, would you say that domestic violence is happening far more than what most people would anticipate?
Yes, because a lot of people don't want to be labeled or that stigma to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't want people in the community to know that I stay in this nice house, but I'm sleeping on needles.
Right.
I have this nice car, but he's using this to control me so I can stay here.
Mm-hmm.
I have this education, and how do you know I'm being abused because I'm the mayor or I'm the governor? How do you know that I'm being abused and I'm the state representative? It
Mm-hmm.
can happen to anyone at any time, at any
Mm-hmm.
place. As
Mm.
long as your heart is beating and you're breathing and you're a functioning adult, even dysfunctional people still experience domestic violence, you can still be a part or impacted by that. And it can like I said, it can go far reaching.
We're going to go to break again, but when we come back, let's talk about maybe some prevention and intervention, some ways to address it, and maybe even some ways to avoid it. We are still here on Doctor to Doctor in the chat room with Dr. Robert Cannon. We're talking about domestic violence awareness, and we will be right back after the break. And we are still here with Dr. Cannon. We're talking about domestic violence today. Before we went to break, I mentioned like what are some things we can do to prevent it, domestic violence, and what are some interventions, which I think you kind of hit on some of those. But let's talk about some preventative things for domestic violence.
Once when I started my study on domestic violence, I opted for a domestic violence registry. But of course, that didn't come to light because that has something to do with legal situations.
Mm-hmm.
But there are certain things that you can do to protect yourself. One, look them up. You can look people up. You can also meet when instead of meeting in places that are not safe, meet them because domestic violence can happen as you meet people. Meet them open area when you're first meeting someone. You can also notice when they start having signs,
Mm-hmm.
shouting,
Mm-hmm.
throwing things, trying
Short
to
fuses. Short
short fuse.
fuses.
Ooh, very short. Short
Isn't
fuse.
that something? Because I've noticed that about some people that I've met, and I'm like, that's really interesting. That something that seems so minute could trigger them in a way that they just kind of snap in the moment, right? I've even noticed where they noticed it too and try to reel themselves back in quickly, you know, which kind of said to me, oh, but if you were in another environment, maybe if you were at home, maybe if you were with your partner, you would not have reeled it, back in.
Also, why are you wearing that dress? You're just getting off work. Call me as soon as you get off work. You about to go to bed. Call me before you go to bed. Why are you wearing lipstick to go to bed? Why are you wearing eyeshadow to go to bed? Why are you wearing that dress when you leave out? Why are you? They're
Wow.
all. Oh yeah, you can tell. It gets, and the people like, oh he's so interested. No, that person is tracking you. He's tracking your every movement. Well, you. sometimes they even put the little sensor in your car. Why you went 10 miles that way? Well, they want you to constantly explain stuff that in a normal relationship you wouldn't have to hold a conversation about. And I saw you talk to your cousin. That is my cousin. No, that's your boyfriend. They go to the outer limits and that's so, oh, he's so cute. That's not cute. That's dangerous. And
Wow.
so yeah, they pick their marks and they feel it out, and if they say, well, that person's not objective to that, I'm just going to keep going. And to the point that, well, this is a constant check. That's how you know when a person has those type of tendencies, asking you questions like that. And why are you wearing that perfume to work? And didn't I tell you not to wear it? And they just a constant knee-jerk reaction, and it's a short fuse. But then he's like, well, I probably shouldn't have put that on. Like, no, that's control. So those things are constant questions, constant tracking, to the point where, you need permission to do this, permission to do that. That is the beginning stages of domestic violence.
Eggshells. So if I met somebody, I'm saying I'm thinking another female, so I'm speaking from a female perspective. If I met another female that I suspected might be in a domestic violence situation, what should my steps be?
A lot of times people open up, there are different windows of opportunity. Everybody just can't just talk to everybody all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a time when a person's going to be vulnerable to talk. And a lot of times you just can't be condemning. And a lot of times you say, how are you feeling? Are you okay? What's
Mm-hmm.
going on? And a
Mm-hmm.
heartfelt question, well, how long you been feeling this way today? What's going on? You want to talk about it? And when you talk to the person about it and they divulge that, just explain to them, whatever we talk about is between me and you, but whatever we do need to get you some help through other agencies. It don't have to be at this workplace. And to safeguard your situation, safeguard the situation, you can give them information about the hotline, the domestic violence hotline, so you won't be implicated sometimes at work. Because some
Mm-hmm.
like, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know you were gonna tell me all that. So give
Mm-hmm.
them the hotline number, give them the numbers to
Mm-hmm.
different agencies where they can get help, and that way you can let them know. I'm glad you told me. We can Google a number together. You can call from your phone and get you some help. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what people need a leg up and a hand out just with some help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And respect the person's choices in leaving and or what they're experiencing, and just tell them about things that happen, such as the 1-800 domestic violence number,
Mm-hmm.
or agency like the United Way or the Salvation Army.
Mm-hmm. So how can we better educate people, particularly young people, about preventing domestic violence, you know, about healthy relationships, and how can we better educate? Because I've seen in the current work that I do around school safety. I've even seen in the high school settings, right? The boyfriend that maybe that's what he sees at home, that he thinks he can slap the girlfriend around and control her and keep her in check. How do you think we better educate?
We first of all have to realize our children see things at home.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times when they see domestic violence, they think it's normal and is all what they've been exposed to. Getting them some the proper counseling to help them so they can be functioning teenagers, functioning young adults. Also, we as role models, sometimes it's good to pull them to the side, so that's borderline domestic violence. You can't push on that girl like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they stop and like, sometimes I tell them in school,
When you put a name on it, it
yeah,
helps.
that's a little domestic violence thing, but what you doing? Then they
Mm-hmm.
stop like, so sometimes you have to call it what it is. If you sell drugs, you're a drug dealer. If you're doing it at
Mm-hmm.
school, you're still a drug dealer. So if you're doing things, you're hitting on girls, yeah, that's domestic violence. Now you threading the line, keep your hands off her, and you need to separate. So we
Mhm.
as people and that we see things, it's nothing wrong with us. Just like you said, we're talking to them and communicating to them about what domestic violence is and
Mhm.
what's proper and what's improper uh, forms of communicating or talking to a person of the opposite sex so they can have a better knowledge because everybody's not privy to consultation or a proper person talking to them about their actions. And that's how
Mhm.
they come along. So,
Mhm.
of course, in your environment, people respect what you're saying. They
Yeah.
respect what I'm saying in my environment. So they want to listen to someone who's stepping and saying, hey, you're not going to do that here. You're not going to push on her. You're going to stop. In fact, you're going to apologize for it. You make them own up to it when they're kids so they'll know
Right.
how it feels to say, hey, I don't like this feeling of apologizing about hitting on somebody else.
Mhm.
It doesn't seem so glorified right now, like what what,
Mhm.
what they might
Mhm.
have seen in their house or in their neighboring surroundings.
Mhm. Can you share a story of someone who survived? Do you know someone who survived domestic violence and their journey to safety? Just like how did you land here in doing this work and this research around this whole critical issue of domestic violence?
Dr. Shaw, a lot of people tell me about these situations. A lot of people are highly impacted by it. I know one lady, she was in love, very uh, educated woman. Come to find out she was dating somebody and he was abusive, tried to kill him.
Mm.
She took him back. Then when one night they got back together again, I want to talk to you. Can we talk outside? Let's go sit in the car. By the way, if you're experiencing domestic violence, don't go sit no calls on nobody because they're gonna
Right.
pull off possibly.
Right.
And he pulled off and he was abusing in the car. And so when they got to his family residence, they noticed that the young lady was lethargic and in and out. And they got out of the car. His family member got out of the car and called the police. And she did something that was very key. She didn't go back. A person experiencing domestic violence have to realize the only true way is going to help you is not to go back. And
Mhm.
so that pushed me to researching domestic violence because a lot of stuff was on actually the the other aspect, the impact of it actually happened. Instead of a proactive approach, it was done from a reactionary approach. So I
Mhm.
dealt with it from a proactive approach through through researching women experiencing it and their voices. And
Mm.
so trying to get a policy set in place to help them talk about it at the workplace or some form of normalcy where they can feel free or feel like they can come on a platform and actually discuss or talk about their problems so they can get a way out so they wouldn't go back and revert back to that situation again.
Do you know of any really severe domestic violence cases where there was really no physical harm, but it was still pretty severe?
Yes, I know one situation where it was physical. It was physical. In fact, the man gave her a concussion. She was trying to leave the house. He pushed her head through the wall, and she caught a concussion. Now, once again, if you're not noticing where the PTSD comes in at, you don't
Mhm.
realize that you're experiencing it. So this person that she was dating had mental health issues, and so once he tried to come, they both had guns because
Mhm.
open carry
Mhm.
state.
Mhm.
One night he tried to do the same thing again, and she shot at him in the house because he tried to strangle her. The bullet grazed his shoulder and hit the chandelier and ricocheted. Now he went to the hospital, but he said, he explained to everybody he was having some type of heart problem. That was his excuse to be there, but he was really recovering from a gunshot wound. And they never got back together after that.
Mhm.
So, she wasn't shot, but that instant from her being in that concussion mode, when it came down to again, it became a life or death situation. Now, if that gun was just a couple inches over, she could have went to prison for the rest of her life, helping herself because the force
Mm-hmm.
continuum was he didn't have a gun, she did.
She
So
did.
she could have went to prison for the rest of life for murder. So it becomes a very delicate situation. But knowing that when people put those stairway orders on them, it creates a natural order, or a law order of protection in a court of law, and it becomes more or less a protection for you to protect yourself.
But then are there situations where there's just, the brainwashing, the controlling what the person wears, controlling the finances, the isolation from the family, all of those things that you talked about early on when you described what domestic violence is. Do you know of situations like that? But then there was no physical harm, but they still had, you know, complete control of the person.
Yes. They a lot of times it's like if you commit a crime, is soft crime and harsh crime.
Mm-hmm.
People, I knew this lady one time. She wore she had to wear certain things, and she couldn't be around certain people, and she put up for almost like that for almost 18 years.
Yeah.
And until the sex part came in, where the infidelity came in,
Mm-hmm.
that's when everything came to a head. So she literally put up with that, with
Mm-hmm.
no bruises, no marks, where she's going, controlling the money, controlling what she wears, controlling where she her hair, all to to the fact that even putting her down about how she looked.
Mm-hmm.
So, it there, but until that infidelity issue came out, that's when it all started realizing that I subjected myself to this and I needed to get out. And that's what happened in that situation.
Mm-hmm. So as we come close to the end of the show today, um, talk about how we can become advocates for domestic violence. In terms of our communities and prevention. I mean, when I say communities, that encompasses everything, whether it's our schools, our churches, or whatever.
The best way you become an advocate is to actually it's hard to volunteer at those at the shelters, but showing up at the rallies, showing up for people at work, showing up for people that you know, your own relatives,
Mm-hmm.
showing up and showing out saying we're not gonna have this at 2020 Happy Street. You can stay here, he can't come in. Sometimes you have to draw a line and say y'all can stay, but like I said, put the stairway order in effect to keep them away from the surroundings so you can call the police because you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to endanger other people helping you. But you show up and talk to and read the type of information. Read up on domestic violence situations and policies as far as it relates to the ones that they do have in place.
Mm-hmm.
And talk to people and giving them information such as pamphlets and actually volunteering it if you can at shelters if they
Mm-hmm.
let you if they let you.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of hard. It was easier for a woman to volunteer at a domestic violence shelter than it is a man. But if you're a woman, yeah, you can volunteer at the shelters and help out with watching the children, cooking, any type of work that you do on that level in a community can be impactful in a setting where the people are vulnerable victims.
You mentioned early on that you wanted to have a registry for the perpetrators. What kind of pushback did you get on that, and why?
I got a pushback from the academia level on the area academia because they said that will be a law, and my work is in domestic violence, not actual prosecution or pushing a law. But
Okay.
that law, that actual registry, if you have a person that's convicted of, it's almost like a sex offender registry. They'll
Mm-hmm.
actually put on there, and before you go on a date, hey, look, I looked you up on the registry. You abused two people already. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I can't date you because I don't feel safe. So
That's such a some really great advice that like you can go because I really think I missed my calling. I should have been a private investigator anyways. But that's really good
never too
advice. I
late.
mean, just go
Never
out
too
there and
late.
look.
Look, and even with a registry like sex offender, you can't be 200 feet of this area, 50 feet. Hey, well, you'd abused this woman and broke her jaw.
Mhm.
You don't need to be 50 feet away from this area of school, or at
Mhm.
least put the sign up and say, "Hi, I'm such and such. I'm a domestic violence abuser.
Mhm.
I'm moving in the area." So he come knock on the door asking for some cookies or ice cream or
Mhm.
beer. And look, we don't have it. Go back home. Go to Walmart on your own. So I
Right.
mean, it was. I mean, it's a common sense thing. And actually, anybody, if they were actually pushing that, you could push a person could push that if they solicit that to a legislator or anyone that can put a law in a book. They can have that law pushed to a certain level to have it administered or considered a law if they actually wanted to push that.
Mhm. Any final thoughts today?
My final thought is if you if you're experiencing domestic violence, if you know of someone experiencing domestic violence, we all are involved and we need to
Mhm.
help each other get out, help each other get away, and help each other come back to help other people that experience it. Don't just leave and say, well, you know what, I got out, you get out on your own. Sometimes the person that experienced that situation can be the best helper of getting others that get out. God put you through things to save yourself, to help yourself, and can use you as an example to others to help them on the way out also.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming back, and you are welcome back anytime. Thank you guys for coming back. You come back every Saturday, and I do appreciate it. I welcome you come back next Saturday. Same chat channel, same chat time, right here on WOJG on 94.7 FM.